The rule at the Obsidian was simple. If Jang Seoryun hated his meal, the chef lost a finger. For 15 years, the silent mafia had eaten in total, terrifying silence, destroying lives with a single nod of his head. I was just the waitress meant to clear the plates of the dead. But tonight, I didn't bring him a menu. I brought him a memory he had murdered a decade ago, the forbidden dish. And for the first time in 15 years, the devil didn't nod. He screamed. Jang Seoryun didn't just walk into a room. He erased the air within it. At 33, he was the undisputed shadow king of Seoul's underworld. He moved with a predatory stillness, his presence announced only by the rhythmic thump-thump of his silver-headed cane and the suffocating silence he demanded. Rumors said he was mute because he had swallowed hot lead during a betrayal. Others said he simply found human speech beneath him. He sat at the center table of the empty restaurant, a man carved from ice and expensive silk. Across from him sat a rival boss, a man currently begging for his life. Seoryun didn't listen. He just stared at the clock, his eyes cold, calculating, and utterly hollow. He was a man who felt nothing, a heartless machine in a Tom Ford suit. Then there was me, Nyara Whitcombe. I was the only black waitress in a district that didn't want me there. I was 23, a culinary prodigy who had been blacklisted from every five-star kitchen in the city after I refused to let a celebrity chef steal my recipes. I was working here for under-the-table cash to pay for my sister's heart surgery. I was a nobody, an invisible ghost in a white apron. But I knew a secret. I had seen the way Seoryun's hand trembled whenever he saw a certain spice on the rack. I knew the forbidden dish wasn't forbidden because it was poisonous. It was forbidden because it was the only thing that could make him feel. And tonight, I was going to force him to feel. The kitchen was a war zone. The head chef had just fainted because Seoryun's second-in-command, a man with a scarred face and a silenced pistol, had walked in to inspect the appetizers. "Mr. Jang is bored," the man said. "When he is bored, people disappear." I stepped over the fainted chef. I didn't grab the wagyu. I didn't grab the truffle. I grabbed a clay pot blackened by fire. "What are you doing, foreigner?" the bodyguard hissed, his hand moving to his holster. "That's not on the menu." "The menu is why he's bored," I said, my heart drumming against my ribs. "He doesn't want to be fed. He wants to be woken up." I ignored the gun. I ignored the gasps of the other servers. I prepared the dish. Ganjang jejang, soy-marinated crab, but not the luxury version. I made the humble version. The kind sold in the street markets of the 1990s, infused with a rare, smoky chili oil from my own heritage. It was a fusion of his lost childhood and my hidden talent. The forbidden dish. Forbidden because it was the last thing his mother cooked before she was assassinated in front of him. I walked out into the dining room. The silence was so heavy it felt like it would crush my lungs. Every bodyguard in the room tracked my movement. Seoryun didn't even look up. He was busy looking at a tablet showing the bank accounts he was about to drain. I slammed the clay pot down onto the table, hard. The bang echoed like a gunshot. 10 guns were drawn and pointed at my head instantly. Seoryun's finger paused over the tablet. Slowly, with the lethargy of a demon, he lifted his gaze to mine. I didn't flinch. I pushed the pot toward him. "Eat," I whispered, "before you forget you're still alive." The room went ice cold. A dozen red laser dots appeared on my chest. Seoryun's eyes snapped to mine, dark, intense, and suddenly flooded with a flicker of raw, human confusion. He looked at the bubbling stew, then back at me. Slowly, his trembling hand reached for the spoon. He took a sip. His entire body convulsed. The spoon clattered to the floor. Seoryun gripped the table, his knuckles turning white, his chest heaving as if he were suddenly drowning in the air itself. A low, guttural vibration started in his throat, a sound no one had heard in 15 years. Why, he rasped. The boardroom fell into a shock so deep it felt like the earth had stopped spinning. The Mafia boss had spoken. He looked at me, tears streaming down his face, and his next words were a broken command. "Who sent you?" Jang Seoryun didn't just speak. He sounded like a man tearing his way out of a grave. The guards stood frozen, their weapons still aimed at my heart, but their hands were shaking. They were witnessing a miracle or a disaster. Seoryun stood up, the chair screeching against the marble floor. He didn't look like a boss anymore. He looked like the 8-year-old boy who had watched his world burn. He grabbed my wrist, pulling me closer until I could see the reflection of my own fear in his dark pupils. "That spice," he choked out, his voice a jagged whisper. "Only one person knew that ratio. My mother is dead. How do you have her fire?" "She wasn't just your mother, Seoryun," I whispered back, making sure only he could hear. "She was the woman who saved my grandmother's life in the Seoul riots. She gave her that recipe as a promise that blood is thicker than shadow." He recoiled as if I'd struck him. The heartless monster was cracking. He slumped back into his seat, covering his face with his hands, letting out a sound that wasn't a word. It was a sob. 15 years of frozen grief were melting into the forbidden stew. The moment of vulnerability was short-lived. Seoryun's uncle, Park Jung, the man who had actually been running the daily violence while Seoryun remained a silent figurehead, slammed his hand on the table. "He's broken," Jung screamed at the guards. "The girl has poisoned him. She's a spy. Kill her now." The red laser dots on my chest tightened. I looked at Seoryun. He was still staring at the clay pot, his eyes darting back and forth. He was at a crossroads. Stay silent and let me die, or use the voice he had just found to reclaim his throne. The enforcer's finger squeezed the trigger. "Stop." Seoryun's voice boomed, clear and commanding, vibrating through the walls of the obsidian. It wasn't the voice of a victim, it was the roar of a king. Every guard instinctively dropped their weapon and bowed. The authority in his tone was ancestral, undeniable. He stood up, straight and tall, and looked at his uncle. "I am not poisoned, uncle. I am finally awake." The next month was a blur of adrenaline and silk. By day, I was at the hospital, watching my sister's vitals stabilize. By night, Seoryun was my shadow. He taught me how to read a room without speaking. He taught me that power isn't in the gun, but in the information you hold before the gun is even drawn. We developed a rhythm. He would text me a target, and I, the unimportant black waitress, would enter the high-stakes galas of Seoul to plant bugs and steal ledgers. But something else was happening. In the quiet hours after a mission, we would sit in his penthouse. He would ask me to talk. He wanted to hear about London, about the spices my grandmother used, about the life I had before I became a servant to his world. He was learning to be human again, and I was learning that the heartless boss had a heart that had simply been in deep freeze. The breakthrough came when I stole an encrypted drive from his uncle's safe. The data was devastating. It wasn't rivals who had killed Seoryun's mother 15 years ago. It was Park Jung. He had silenced the mother to control the son. "He didn't just kill her," Seoryun whispered, reading the files. "He watched me go mute and used my silence as a weapon to build his own empire." The rage in the room was palpable. Seoryun didn't scream this time. He just looked at me. "Tonight we will end it, but they expect me to come with an army. They won't expect you." We arrived at the docks, the site of the original murder. It was a trap, and we knew it. Jung was there with 30 men, all armed. "Come to die, nephew," Jung laughed. "And you brought your little cook, how touching." The ambush was perfect, but Seoryun had taught me well. While Jung was focused on Seoryun's Bentley, I was already behind them, moving through the shipping containers like a phantom. I didn't use a gun. I used the one thing Seoryun had given me, the authority of the truth. I hacked the shipyard's massive LED screens, playing the recording of Jung confessing to the murder, a recording I'd snagged while planting the bugs. The guards hesitated. They were loyal to the family, and the family was built on the mother's legacy. To see her murderer standing before them changed everything. Seoryun stepped out of the car, walking calmly into the circle of guns. He didn't look at the weapons. He looked at the men. "I spent 15 years in a prison of silence because of this man's lies," Seoryun announced, his voice echoing over the water. "Who among you is willing to die for a traitor?" One by one, the guards lowered their weapons. Jung was alone. The sun began to rise over Seoul. Park Jung was gone, delivered to the only people more ruthless than the Mafia, the creditors he had cheated to build his side empire. Seoryun and I stood on the pier. The silent butcher was a name of the past. He was just Jang Seoryun now. "The contract is over," he said, looking out at the horizon. "Your sister is healthy. Your bank account is full. You can go back to London. You can open that restaurant you always dreamed of." I looked at the silver ring he had given me weeks ago. "And what about you? Who will be your voice now?" He turned to me, a small, genuine smile breaking across his face, the first real smile in 15 years. He didn't use his phone. He didn't use his cane. He took my hand. "I think," he said softly, "I've learned how to speak for myself, but I'd rather use my voice to ask you to stay, not as a ghost, not as a waitress, but as the woman who finally brought the fire back." I looked at him, the man who was no longer a monster, and I knew my answer.